Joining us now from El Paso, Texas, is Dylan Corbett. He is the executive director of Hope Border Institute. Okay, first thing, when 10 to 15 million migrants enter the USA under the Biden administration, did you or your organization object to that?
Hey, Bill, it's good to have you. It's good to be with you. Great to be on your program. Thanks for the invitation. It's a good question. I think there was the perception that not everything was as orderly as it could have been under the Biden administration. And I think we were certainly vocal about some real criticisms that we had. The way that they enforced immigration law at the border, the way that they really didn't coordinate the arrivals, they didn't do enough to coordinate it in a secure, in an orderly, in a safe way here at the border, the way that they didn't coordinate the arrival of people into many of the interior cities like we saw in New York, that generated perceptions of chaos, that generated the perception that the system wasn't working. And I think that we were fairly critical. There were also a number of people, because they did take some real steps in the direction of increased enforcement at the border. And here in El Paso, for example, during the Biden administration, we saw the numbers of people skyrocketing, the numbers of people who were dying at the border skyrocketing because there was no real way.
And Holman made that point. But look, we researched your organization. We didn't find anything that you objected to the open border policies of the Biden administration. No statement, no interview by you, nothing. So you might have been disturbed by the chaotic aspect of it, but you certainly didn't come out and say, look, we need to stop this. So Trump gets elected, he stops it almost immediately. So what you saw and your agency had to deal with disappeared in about 45 days. Did you object to Trump stopping it?
Well, I think that we all agree. I think Americans, whether they're on the right or on the left, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, that we need to have a well-managed border.
Okay, but what Trump did, though, let's get specific, not theoretical. Theory gets us nowhere in this interview. Trump stopped it. Do you object to the way he did it?
I certainly have some issues with the way he did it because
give me one objection. What did he do that you don't like?
That there's a cost to doing what the president did. The president basically, he shredded our system of asylum, and he shredded our system of receiving refugees. People who are fleeing, they're fleeing wars, they're fleeing serious violence, they're fleeing serious causes of poverty, which are driving them to flee and to migrate to our border in search of protection.
Okay, now, so you think that he shredded it. Now, the official policy of Homeland Security is you can apply for asylum in the United States. You have to go to a port of entry to do so. You can't just be caught in the desert in Texas or Arizona, say to the ICE agent or the Border Patrol agent, I want asylum, which is what Biden allowed. That was the big thing. They disregarded, the Biden administration, the law Congress passed in 1952 saying all asylum must go through the American consulate or embassy in the home country or in the American ports of entry. Now, Trump is enforcing that. You can still apply for asylum here. So you have an objection to that?
Well, I'd question that a little bit, Bill, because I think that the system of asylum really isn't being respected, neither at ports of entry nor in between ports of entry. I'd quibble a little bit with how you characterize asylum law, because people do have the right under our federal law to apply for asylum, even if they were to cross in between ports of entry.
But they can still do that. They don't have the right to apply for it on the ground. They have to go to a port of entry or an American facility in their home country. That's the law. That's what it says.
There we'd have to disagree, because right now you're not able to go to a consulate in Mexico or in Central America to apply to asylum. It simply doesn't exist.
Why not?
You can go to a port of entry. I can tell you right now from my experience, I'm only just a couple of miles from the port of entry here in El Paso. If you were to apply for asylum there, you're going to get turned back. You're going to get sent back to Mexico. So the system right now is not functional. We don't have an asylum system in the United States right now.
Let me look into that, because from what I understand, it is still a functioning system. But if you're right, and I'll report it. Okay, let's move ahead. So you've got now between 10 and 15 new migrants that weren't here in the first Trump administration that are now here. What is the responsibility of the United States government to support those people?
Yeah, you raise a good question. And I think you said earlier in the segment that the United States government really does have a responsibility to know who's coming into our country. And we do.
Yes.
Important. We've got to manage the border so that it's done in a safe way. We've got to protect the national security of our country. And we've got to protect local communities. If people are threats to our community, as you said earlier, you support immigration enforcement of those who are threats. We do have to go after legitimate threats. We shouldn't be allowing anyone to game the system, to exploit the system. We shouldn't be allowing traffickers to take advantage of the broken system. So immigration enforcement really does need to prioritize safety. We can agree on that. Now, what do we do with the other folks who are in the country, some of whom have been in the country for a long time, many who've been here for more than 10 years, many who've been here for more than 20 years, many people who have roots in the country. Their children are going to our schools. They might have a small business. What do we do about those folks? That's the question on the table right now. Whether you agree with what's happening on the border or not, the question right now is what do we do with what we're seeing in the country around enforcement? You mentioned the bishop's statement. I think the big takeaway from the bishops is that they're really pushing back against mass deportation as a strategy for dealing with this population.
But it's really not mass because, if you look at how many migrants are being detained, it's 5% would be a hard number, all right, of all the people who were allowed in here under Biden. But I understand that. I would go a different way. Well, you don't object to criminal aliens being deported immediately, do you?
Well, I think we do need to remove anyone who's a threat to the safety of our.
So criminal aliens gone. And that includes DUIs, domestic services. Right. The problem is, according to Director Homan, who's an honest man. He's he's a hard guy, but when they raid looking for migrants that have judges' orders signed for deportation and criminals, when they raid, very often there are others with them, girlfriends, brothers, sisters, children, who are here without credentials, and they have to bring them all in. That's what the government says. Is that wrong?
Well, as you said, I do think we've got to target people who are threats to our local community, but that's not what we're seeing right now. The data are pretty clear, Bill. If we look at everybody, for example, who's been targeted and arrested and detained this year under the Trump administration, 2/3 of people don't have a criminal conviction. So that's the vast majority. We're talking about the overwhelming percentage of people who have been targeted.
Okay, but 1/3 with criminal interactions, that's a hell of a lot of people in danger. But I'm with you. We don't have a disagreement there. If there's another way, if there's another way to adjudicate peaceful, undocumented migrants, then we should explore that. Congress's responsibility, of course, to do that,
absolutely.
And they don't do it. Okay.
There we agree. Yeah, we've got a broken system, and both parties are at fault, and it's been broken for a long time. And that's the reason that we're in this predicament right now, because we've kicked the can, both the president, the White House.
100%. You can't be going a 1952 law and it's 2025 and you people sit around and do nothing. Now, the Catholic Church, if you look at the theology, are you Catholic?
I am, just like you. Okay. We're Catholics.
Okay, so we have to be compassionate to everybody who's poor and in a bad circumstance, and that includes undocumented migrants. And I am. I can prove it. But the Catholic Church, refuses to use the words undocumented, won't use it. And number two, portrays this as an issue where the government is the bad guy. The U.S. government is the bad guy. And I'll submit to you that the bishops are misguided because the government is trying to protect Americans from this massive wave that nobody has any control over. Do you see my point?
I see what you're saying. I would say that the bishops, and I worked for the bishops for a number of years. I worked for the Vatican for a number of years. I think what's really happening is that these religious leaders are responding to what their local communities are seeing across the country. They're responding to two things. They're responding to that, the reality of these actions of ICE and immigrant enforcement and the raids that are really ugly. They're brutal. I mean, we're talking about moms being separated from families. We're talking about, there's been situations where school teachers have been ripped out of schools, where parents have been ripped out of cars, where their kids are left behind. Nobody wants to see that. That's not the way to.
But that's not the rule. That is the exception.
I think that they're responding to that, though. They're seeing, you've seen the images coming out of Chicago, of Los Angeles, where we're deploying the Department of Homeland Security, but also the FBI, and in some cases, the National Guard and the military. Nobody wants to see this. It's not good. And in fact, it's turning off a lot of voters. A lot of people who supported Trump and said, yeah, we want a secure border. Yeah, we got to fix the immigration system. A lot of people are stepping back. He's losing in the Latino vote. So I think the bishops are responding to what they're seeing locally, but they're also responding to the Pope. Pope Leo, he's been outspoken about this, especially in the last couple months.
But that's his job. See, but I'd like to interview Pope Leo. We're working on it, but I don't think he's going to do it. But I would say, Your Holiness, my first question after asking him for forgiveness would be, listen, every government, legitimate government, has an obligation to protect its people.
Yep.
And when you let 10 to 15 million unsupervised foreign nationals into a country, that's not protecting your people, Your Holiness, is it? I'd love to see how he answers that one. And they all fall back on the teacher in that school or the mom in the. I got it. But there is a tremendous problem here fostered by our own government under Biden. I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, I think the Holy Father would respond this way. I think he'd say, you're right. There's a place for borders. There's a place for governments managing immigration so that it's done in a way that's efficient and meets our national security needs and maybe even meets our economic needs. I think the Holy Father would probably agree with that. But he'd also say that when we lead with compassion, that when we honor the stranger, when we welcome the stranger, we'll be better off for it because it's the Christian thing to do, it's the right thing to do, but it's also the American thing to do. He's from America. He knows this is a country that's benefited from the contributions of migrants, that they're key to our economic resilience, our social resilience. They make us great as a country. And I think he'd remind us of that there's got to be a better way, that compassion.
Well, there's got to be a better way. You're right. But it isn't letting everybody in. And that is the impression that the Catholic Church is giving, not only the USA, but in Europe as well. Mr. Corbett, very good debate. We really appreciate you, and thank you for coming on today.